Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. We were expecting to do a lot of Nets scouting reports, but not on Spencer Dinwiddie. That's coming up next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always free. It's never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 23,000 subscribers, all of whom are really wondering what this Spencer Dinwiddie thing is going to look like. And I know, like, we had been preparing to reach out to Adam Armbrecht, the host of Locked On Nets. You can also find his work at wegotnets.com. Check all that out. We were like, Andy, I'm like, we're going to have to do it's going to be about Royce ONeal. It's going to be a Dorian Finney-Smith. It's going to be whoever the filler is to make the salary. Did we get a hidden gem here in that deal? No, it turns out it's Spencer Dinwiddie that we're here to do the scouting report on. Are you at all surprised, Adam? Thank you for coming on. That this is how things turned out.
Well, I guess if I was going to put on my Lakers, cap for a minute, wait a minute. So what? We didn't get DeJounte Murray. We didn't, move D'Angelo Russell, who apparently is back to playing great basketball for us. We didn't get Dorian Finney-Smith. We didn't get Royce ONeal, right? Like if you were going down the list, this would have been something didn't work out for us. And maybe this ends up still being valuable, but right from your guys' perspective, this was not the path for the Lakers at the deadline. They seem to come up short on whatever their agenda was.
Well, I think it's potentially an issue, depending on how you look at it, of coming up short. I think it's potentially an issue of not really having the pieces to make some of these deals, particularly in what is, I think, really revealed itself to have been a seller's market. Mm-hmm. And when you look at, I want to talk about this later on with you, when you look at, say, the deal that transpired that led to Royce ONeal going to Phoenix or some of the other deals around the league, I don't know if the Lakers could have ended up putting those pieces together. But in the meantime, there was a lot of reports about disconnect and discontent between the Nets and Spencer Dinwiddie. Like, from your perspective, what happened with, because this was his second go around with Brooklyn. The first one probably was a pretty happy experience for Dinwiddie. Like, what, from your perspective, went wrong?
Yeah, those are the glory days. The last time that Spencer Dinwiddie was here, last time this franchise, you'd think that the superstar era with Kevin Durant and Kyrie would have been the best.
It's pre-crypto, though. So, I wonder if cryptocurrency changed him.
We did at one point, at least I did. I don't think it really caught on, but we did refer to Spencer Dinwiddie as the entrepreneur, right? Because he's got a lot going on beyond the game of basketball. But it's interesting when we think about Spencer Dinwiddie, ironically, the Nets paid him and then traded him to the Washington Wizards. So they got him paid the first time around. You mentioned he goes to Dallas, obviously highly successful behind Luka. But coming back, there was only one report, very loosely speculated, that when they got him back, Spencer Dinwiddie from Dallas, that they wanted to talk about extending him, that this was getting back, even keel, get away from the superstar era. And Spencer Dinwiddie obviously represented one of the better times in the Nets' recent basketball history. Something disconnected there, it seems like, even if it was only a small footprint, because it went from Spencer Dinwiddie being added into the Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Royce ONeal, veteran-heavy team, to him being on the outside looking in. Now, he always mentioned when he talked about Nick Claxton, it was about going to get him paid. He's one of the best defensive players in the league. This core going forward always kept himself on the outside of that. So I don't know if it's role dependent or if it's just that maybe this team, especially without having Ben Simmons for a long stretch to start this year, surprise, surprise, that his role was just shifting and looked different even than it did for the 27 games last year when he came over from Dallas. So I don't know. I'm a little surprised, given the general goodwill between player and organization that seemed to be there, that it looked like Dinwiddie got to a point where it was, I no longer want to be here. I don't see this as being my best option, maybe on an expiring contract to get the next big deal for himself.
There is a ton of inconsistency with his output over the course of his career. It seems to be that he performs better on good teams when when there's something sort of to play for, but broadly never been a particularly good three-point shooter, never been a particularly efficient scorer. That said, when Dinwiddie is right, when he's going well, what does he bring?
He brings secondary ball handling for sure. And you saw this not only last year, but even the beginning of this season, which only makes the drop off or disconnect that much more alarming, because at the start of the year, he was one of the better players. His on-off numbers, he represented the most consistent option that the Nets had, especially in a very thin backcourt. Cam Thomas not ready to take on that role. So secondary ball handling for sure. Need him to run the point for some possessions. Of course, he can do that coming off the bench. He's also a good floor spacer. Listen, you go back and look at his time in Dallas when he plays with Luka, the beyond the arc numbers are phenomenal, career high numbers. They dropped off dramatically coming over to Brooklyn last year initially, and then have dropped even further this season. I mean, he's below 29% from beyond the arc. He's below 40% from the field right now. So all these numbers look alarming. But if you put him on a team with a LeBron James, with an Anthony Davis, with shooters where the spacing is there, he has pretty solid catch and shoot numbers, right? He's north of 35% on catch and shoot threes. I think one of the downfalls, whether or not he's getting towards 31 and is, slowing down a little bit, the Brooklyn Nets had no spacing on this roster. So that's really going to mitigate some of the things that he does well, including getting at the basket. Go back to the Dallas days and even last season. He's getting to the line over 4.5 times a game. Now under 3.5 times this season with Brooklyn. But it's so congested in there, and he doesn't have that quick first step. So some of those skill sets, finishing at the rim, has size, good defensive player for what he is, not an elite, shutdown guy, but they had him playing up and playing some of the best players offensively for other teams in Brooklyn. So I think if you slot him back into where he's supposed to be, right? Veteran guard, coming off the bench, spacing the floor, handling the ball a little bit, you've got a quality player that elevates what you currently have on your bench for LA.
Okay, I want to check back in about the defense in a second, just because that goes counter to a lot of his reputation. So that's potentially a very pleasantly surprising thing to hear about. But offensively, what is his utility off the ball? Because that is one of the things that works, at least offensively, with D'Lo and Reeves, for example, is both of them can have utility off the ball. You want the ball in LeBron's hands, but he is shooting well from outside. Like what does he provide either as a shooter, a cutter, anything like that when he doesn't have the ball?
Yeah, I don't look at him as being a guy off ball who's going to be giving you that backdoor cut, right? So LeBron with the ball in his hands and finding him there. You think about models, like I think Reeves represents this, very active off the ball, right? He's going to run wind sprints to try to get himself to that spot. That's not really Dinwiddie's mold. He is more of a off ball, stationary, wait for your look inside of a more superstar driven roster. So I don't think you're going to get those type of cutting actions off of him. I think if you're running some high double screen actions near the top of the key, if he's going to go ahead and maybe be triggering the ball, get into LeBron James' hands, work some of those screens, and then get into the mid-range game, he's comfortable there as well. So I think you can find pockets for him in and around the paint, something that he didn't do a lot of for Brooklyn, mid-range shooting. But I think that actually will function a lot better with LA, because again, you're talking about all of your front court can also shoot and score. The Nets didn't have that, so it really mitigates what is probably one of his better strengths if we're talking about floor spacing and then maybe finding shooting pockets for himself as well.
All right, let's get into this defensive question here next, because obviously, well, I mean, you put it in quotes, but you're putting him next to and comparing him to D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves, both of whom who have struggled, to say the least, this year on that side of the ball. So it actually is conceivable that Dinwiddie could provide, at the very least, a small upgrade or not make things worse. So talk about defense, and we'll talk about just how high the asking price really was for Dorian Finney-Smith. All of that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by PrizePick, America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and then watch the winnings roll in. And it is demon time on PrizePick. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and Goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play at PrizePick. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts, and PrizePick also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday, like today, every Tuesday. PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. Plus, it's an excuse to get yourself some tacos as part of the theme, which is a win in and of itself. PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay as well for quick and easy deposits into your account this basketball season. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Reminder, the Lakers play the Pistons tonight at 7:30 p.m. That team is a mess. Catch every Lakers game on the hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Lakers.
Okay, Adam, the defensive issues with the Lakers backcourt, particularly at the point of attack, have been a problem this year. Austin Reeves tries his hardest at everything he does, but is
including leaving shooters open.
Right. He has a real tendency to overhelp, and
you got to try everything, guys. Sometimes you throw it up against the wall, and it turns out not defending at all. That can be a problem. And,
he puts his whole ass into it, man. Even his mistakes, they are extreme mistakes.
Yeah. Don't start trying to clean up other people's stuff until you take care of your own room. Is how I would put it. But he's trying. You can't fault the effort. Russell even loses focus, but he's trying too. He's just not very good at it, to his own admission. Where can Dinwiddie help? You mentioned a little bit of potentially as a guy who might be able to pick people up. If you're not asking him to guard Kyrie or something, and fit into a team defensive scheme.
Yeah, I think again, it's when you compare it to Brooklyn, they asked him to pick up the best shooter. Right. Go defend the best shooter on the other team for stretches here. And that's mostly because, Cam Thomas still learning, right? He's an effort guy defensively now, which is a big leap forward for him, but he's not good defensively at this point. And Dinwiddie, go and look at it for D'Lo, 6'3", right? Small backcourt player. Reeves listed at 6'5". I don't know if I fully believe that, but also under 200 pounds. So even just from a size standpoint, Nets were always a thin team. So when we refer to, Spencer Dinwiddie as well, he's one of the bigger bodies in the backcourt. It's not saying a lot for Brooklyn, but it would be saying something for the LA Lakers, right? Just a guy, he has good length. I think he has one of the better reaches for backcourt players too, in terms of wingspan. So that's, I think, what his biggest benefit is. He's quick enough to stay in front of guys. He's okay going with players to the basket. He can actually do a decent job impacting shots going towards the rim. Again, am I going to sit here and tell you, everybody clear out, let him go ahead and lock up, as you say, Kyrie Irving? No, that's, you're asking for a problem there. The hard part probably for me to give Lakers fans an exciting note about him is effort. Because one of the things that we looked, and this is for a lot of players on the Brooklyn Nets, we said, well, they certainly are. They're certainly making a lot of effort, closeouts, right? Scrambling. And over the course of the season, we actually took a step back and said, well, sometimes the scrambling looks like effort, but it's actually just being out of position, right? It's actually just not being where you're supposed to be on the court. So that's something I wonder about with Dinwiddie in terms of not getting lost in the defensive scheme, especially if there's an adjustment here in terms around where is Anthony Davis' responsibility, where is LeBron James going to be? Yeah. The benefit here is that, like a Nicholas Claxton, I'll just say in terms of being able to step out away from the basket, Dinwiddie has familiarity with that as well. So there's flexibility defensively. I think you have enough bigger players on your roster from a defensive assignment standpoint that he'll actually be picking up the fourth best scoring option in a lot of situations.
Often guys coming off the bench too. So
right. And you're also talking about second unit. So that comparison alone, he was starting for Brooklyn this year, picking up starting defensive assignments. Now he'll be on the bench picking up second unit players. So his game will probably elevate solely just based on where he slots in for LA.
Yeah, and you're kind of touching on, Adam, where I wanted to ask, because like in theory, the engagement factor, the Lakers have slipped considerably over the last month defensively, but in theory are supposed to be a little bit more organized and capable on that end as compared to the Nets. No disrespect. Assuming that the Lakers can articulate a structure, is he the type of defender who can understand that, follow the principles, do all that kind of stuff to fit into a team scheme and avoid the types of scrambling and mistakes and being out of position that frankly, Austin Reeves has been prone to this year.
Yeah, I think so, because again, Jacques Vaughn, they went from doing a lot of, they would switch every single thing, every single action on defense, they would switch all the time. Day'Ron Sharpe couldn't find minutes because they were unwilling to take their 5 and play drop coverage. They started to mix and match that this season, and there was a lot of confusion throughout the roster. But Spencer Dinwiddie has been around long enough, played in enough systems, right? I think if you give him the directive, he's going to follow that. And I hate to be as basic as, he's playing with LeBron James and Anthony Davis now. There's a different level of expectation, right? Ben Simmons, once upon a time, was considered to be a ex-player in the league. He's not that anymore. Not that Dinwiddie doesn't respect all those guys, but there's a hierarchy here, right? So get where you need to be. And the reward for that, unlike with Brooklyn, is going to be probably back on the other end. You get the easy wide open triples, right? You get the easy baskets offensively. So there's probably a little bit of reward here for Spencer Dinwiddie to be locked in on that end to get the benefit on the other side of the court. I'm going to go to the Dallas Mavericks stats on it, right? Like that's what you're hoping for here for Spencer Dinwiddie. Now it's a year and a half later. He is a little bit older, but I think that you're going to get closer to that version of him than what you saw in Brooklyn, especially over the course of this season, right? Back in Dallas, he shot 45% from the field. He was 40% from beyond the arc, clearly a best career mark there, and did that the year prior in Dallas as well. And if you want the sample size that maybe bolsters you a little bit more, go look at Washington. When he goes to the Wizards and it's an expanded role, he's shooting 31% from deep, 38% from the field. Like, you can almost one-to-one look at what Jordan Poole is up to these days for the Wizards, right? Go play on a bad team, you get to do more, increase your usage. Of course, there's a reason why you're not a superstar player in the league, right? There's a reason why you don't lead teams. So when you look at his usage percentage up in the mid-20s, keep that thing underneath 20%, and you're going to get probably the best value on him. I think it's about finding that right axis, and it seems like, at least on paper in LA, they should be successful with that. Although, as you mentioned, Brian, the Lakers have been a bit of a confusing team so far this season, so it's never 100% what you're going to get on the court.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Speaking of value, it seems like Brooklyn, according to reports, they wanted all the value for Dorian Finney-Smith. There have been reports like 2 picks and a good young player.
Is that true?
Yeah,
really want 2 first rounders for Dorian Finney-Smith?
I believe it got at 1.2 the equivalent of 2 first round picks, so that could be a pick and a player. And then now whether or not you think that that's worth it. Once upon a time, last deadline, they were offered 2 first round picks for Dorian Finney-Smith, and they turned it down because they thought they were doing this thing right. They wanted to keep winning. I think his cost control too, because he has another year and then a player option, which it's north of 15 million. So he might actually opt into that based on where his age will be. So they can push a decision on him a little bit further. This is mostly Sean Marks. I think he wanted to set the standard that we don't want to trade them. Like, you're publicly saying, we do not want to trade these players. We like them on our roster. We like what they represent. If you want to blow us out of the water, great. And this trade deadline ended up just not materializing in that way in terms of what, and then the Lakers, as you guys know, you just didn't have the spare parts to really send out for that. Andy, you and I did this conversation. The fan base loved me for it, by the way. They were big fans of what I was bringing. Just taking all your guys. I took every young player I could find.
So popular.
But it's, if you're the Lakers, you probably have to draw the line somewhere. And some things are just the mechanics of first round picks and whether or not you can move them. And then it's young players. If I found out that the Lakers were willing to offer the 1 first round pick and Jalen Hood-Schifino, I think that the Nets should jump at that. They need to be younger. They need more draft capital. But this off-season matching salaries, that's going to be something that maybe the Nets think about too.
Royce ONeal ended up going to Phoenix, and we heard from a lot of Laker fans who were unhappy that the Lakers couldn't figure out a way to do it. I actually think it would have been complicated if you look at the actual deal and the machinations. Mm-hmm. How much do you think, though, he actually would help the Lakers? Like, what type of season was he having?
So unlike, say, Spencer Dinwiddie, Royce ONeal post superstar trades, exact same player. The percentages didn't change from beyond the arc. He, for the Nets, could do a little bit of ball handling, which is saying a lot for that team at the time. And then they also, listen, they made him play 5. He's bodying up against Giannis in certain situations. Now, you don't want to do that, and you never have to for the Lakers. I actually think if there was a player, while Dorian Finney-Smith is regarded very highly for what Royce ONeal is and what the cost was going to be, I think the Lakers should have tried to be in on him because he's the perfect player. He has versatility. You can play him at a lot of different roles. And again, his consistency, specifically from beyond the arc, never dropped a single beat pre or post having superstars on the roster. I think the Lakers would have been very satisfied with him, and you could make an easy case, very easy case, obviously, that having him instead of Spencer Dinwiddie would be a much better version of this team going down the stretch.
Still running the same trouble of figuring out which players to send out. I mean, that was really the ultimate, I think, issue with the Lakers in trying to put any of these things together. It was an interesting deadline, to say the least. The post stuff with who ends up on the buyout market, and Spencer Dinwiddie ending up in LA certainly adds a wrinkle. But make sure you check out WeGotNets.com. Make sure you check out Locked On Nets. I do, just to follow all the Cam Thomas news. He's on my fantasy team as a keeper, so I'm very interested in his development. Adam, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Oh, anytime, guys. The brothers Kamenetsky. That's what I'm here for. I'm here for the experience.
And it is quite that. All right, we will react to everything Adam Armbrecht had to say next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by BetterHelp, and sometimes we just need an opportunity to get things off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially with someone who's unbiased in your life. We do this show that we hope is a nice escape from real life. You love the Lakers, I love the Lakers, and it can be a stress release from real life to enjoy a Laker game. Sometimes there can be stress from watching a Laker game, but either way, it's something that can relieve stress. But we also know there are more pressing issues in life, and most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team. And for those issues, it can be huge to talk with a professional. And I know therapy has helped me and my family during a really difficult period in our lives, and therapy can be different for everyone. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible, suited for your schedule. You can visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
Do want to let everyone know this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code, all lowercase now, LockedOnNBA, for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, so plenty to get into off of that. Thanks again to Adam Armbrecht for joining us. Do want to remind everyone, Lakers taking on the Pistons tonight at the Crypt. 7:30 is the start. Catch every minute of the Lakers hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search Lakers. This is obviously a game, Andy, the Lakers must win. The Pistons, while I guess playing a little better, are still terrible. So just don't take it lightly. Be professional, as LeBron has put it before the Charlotte game, and they ought to win this one. It is a big, big, big problem if they don't. Anyway, that was interesting. There was a lot in there that I thought Lakers fans could latch onto, particularly on the defensive side.
Yes.
Hearing not lockdown, but competent, I thought was reassuring.
Well, I mean, if nothing else, it gives you optionality. Like, I'm not going to lie, Spencer Dinwiddie wasn't somebody that I was necessarily thinking about closing a lot of games, just because you don't automatically go there with bench players for the most part, unless it's somebody that's playing a bench role that you really know is, for all intents and purposes, a starter. Just the configurations work better with him coming off the bench. But the idea that Dinwiddie could at least be an option, if nothing else, the best of the defensive weak links, if you need a ball handler out there, and in most cases you need at least one who isn't LeBron, it's nice to know that Dinwiddie actually could be a better option than what I think is his reputation.
Maybe more than his reputation. I'm not sure I would go so far as to he becomes a really good closing option, but just hearing that, he's maybe perhaps not the level of liability, because really what I think, like we talked about it for Monday's show, what I think is appealing about Dinwiddie is it really does allow the Lakers to have a real point on the floor at all times. And it allows Reeves to kind of move back and forth in that role where he wants to, but not have to play point guard when D'Angelo Russell's not on the floor with Gabe Vincent unavailable. And so, to hear that, okay, maybe he's not going to maybe elevate the backcourt defensive rotation, he's also maybe not going to make it worse. I think is at the very least a good start. It doesn't then, if he can be a defensive neutral, if he whatever, it doesn't eat into the options that Ham has in terms of trying to figure out how to best utilize Dinwiddie for the 20-ish, 18 to 24 minutes. I don't know how much he's going to play, but it's just that he's better than his reputation. I think is comforting.
I'm at least holding out open-mindedness that he could potentially be more than just a defensive neutral, that relatively speaking, he could be a defensive upgrade with this group. That doesn't mean he would be a defensive upgrade or defensively along the lines with other backcourt combinations around the league. It's not saying that Spencer Dinwiddie is a great defender if he could be an upgrade, but an upgrade's an upgrade. And
sure, although I would wonder whether or not that it would have to be a pretty big jump, I think, to make up for, unless again Dinwiddie's performance as a shooter, his engagement, all those things improve. Would he be a better option? With the small upgrade potentially in defense outweigh what I think would be a downgrade offensively versus both Russell and.
I don't know. I mean,
I just think if you're going to sit a guard at the end of the game, it would probably be D'Lo, and it would probably be for a different player once they have all their guys available. But I mean, look, we'll see.
It depends on, I think offensively, it really depends on how much shooting you have out there, because Dinwiddie is somebody that can handle the ball. He is someone that can run your sets. I mean, he's somebody that can fill that type of role. I think it would just depend on the spacing on the floor. The other thing that I liked hearing about was the downhill ability, because that's something we've talked about that has been missing a lot with both D'Lo and Reeves, who, they have the ability to get into the lane, but they don't do it in a just take off and go, make you defend as they are just going towards the basket, that sort of force, something that they've really been missing in Dennis Schroeder, that they just, that element, especially as they've been trying to space the floor a lot, and, not just for shooting and not just for LeBron and AD, but also for potential driving lanes. The idea that Dinwiddie can be that type of presence and offer that type of utility, that I think opens up some options that they really didn't have before.
Yeah, and it's he should have the space. I mean, Russell and Reeves are both obviously very capable of getting into the lane, but they do it differently. Yeah, it's off the screen. It's that kind of stuff. It's the change of pace. It's oftentimes with Reeves, it's a process. It's a longer process of doing it as he's probing and kind of doing all that stuff.
A lot of jazz hands.
Yeah, and so he does. It's nice to have a different way of doing that. And again, there's something to be said for, as much as Dorian Finney-Smith would have addressed a need, or Royce ONeal addresses a specific need. And I'm not saying this is better than had the Lakers had the stuff to make deals like that happen. But all I'm saying is that there is value in enhancing things you're already good at. Taking a strength and making it stronger is, and so for the Lakers, who are good at getting into the paint, who are good at drawing fouls and creating offense in that way, adding somebody like Dinwiddie to presumably the second unit, and continuing that with a little bit more, the kind of a greater capacity, still on the floor with Reeves, still on the floor with Russell, a LeBron, AD, whoever else is around it, you're able to really do that better. That improvement helps your defense. It helps your other components of your game. So if you can tweak up that offense a little bit more in ways that slow down a game, allow you to play off of made free throws and things like that, finishes at the basket, that can help the Lakers in transition defense, in half-court defense.
Yeah, we talked about this for Monday's show. Like, you can make an argument that Dorian Finney-Smith or Royce ONeal, we discussed this more at length with Adam, could have filled what feels like more of a pressing need in terms of weaknesses for the Lakers, or just guys that they don't have to do certain things, check certain boxes. Finney-Smith or ONeal could have done that better. But as far as just basketball skill, certainly in terms of buyout options, but you could argue most of the guys that moved at the deadline Dinwiddie is as skilled as basically anybody. I mean, like in terms of just adding talent, like talent as a basketball player, I think Dinwiddie is about as good as the Lakers could have done during this period, regardless of how they got the player.
I mean, they're not in play for Pascal Siakam. They're not in play for OG and like guys like that. That's just not something they were.
I'm talking about guys realistically they could have gotten.
And so it is no harm to add talent for nothing, which is essentially what they've done. And it doesn't make them worse. Figuring out how to play,
I think it makes them better.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like the acquisition doesn't make the cost of the acquisition. If you have this, and it does Philly need. The Lakers have missed specific aspects of Gabe Vincent's skill set in terms of the presumption of defense and stuff like that. But they've also just missed the availability of a legitimate third guard, and like not being able to have that and shoehorning Austin Reeves not into a position where he's not just handling the ball as an attacking guard to try to score or whatever, but also having to do the offensive orchestration, and then also getting difficult assignments defensively, and then also just not having a competent, reliable, professional third guard has been a major limitation since Vincent went down, and this solves that problem.
Yeah, I mean, one way to think about it would be Vincent is a resource, and the Lakers have not had that resource.
Correct.
Dinwiddie now gives them a resource they didn't have before. So
different resource, but he's also bigger than Vincent. He's not the defender, but he's also bigger, which makes it is meaningful in some ways. So again, reminder that the Lakers are taking on the Pistons tonight. This is a must-win game. You cannot lose to teams that have 6 or 7 wins on the season. That just can't happen. That game starts at 7:30. Catch every minute of a Lakers broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search Lakers. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show, hang out with over 23,000 subscribers. Andy will be back. I will hopefully be joining tonight's show with Dorian FinneySmith from Locked On Clippers, also a big Lakers guy, knows everything that's going on here. So he's going to be joining us post-show, hopefully for all three of us, but we'll see. And we will see everybody after the game.